In this video we're going to take a look at splitting a sound into various different frequency bands. You may want to do this to apply different treatments, different effects to the bands. So for example, you could want to sidechain a sound with the kick drum to move the low frequencies out of the way of the kick without imparting the obvious pumping sound to your mid-range frequencies. And something very similar with the stereo widening. You would obviously want to keep the real low frequencies below 100 Hertz sitting in mono, and as you move up above that you may want to start to widen the sounds progressively wider as you go up into the high frequencies. And also things like pads, you can of course add different modulations to each of the frequency bands, and that's going to make a sound that evolves and is a whole load more interesting. So for this example I've picked a synth sound. It's quite a bassy sound. It covers all of the frequency spectrum with the exception of these real high frequencies here. And it's actually very easy to split this up into different bands. All you need is the Multiband Dynamics plugin. And I'm just going to turn the amount down to 0. And this effectively turns off all of the compression, anything that this plugin may be doing to affect the sound in any way, with the exception of these different frequency bands over here. So you have different cutoff points here, or rather crossovers. So if I just solo the low, you can see straight away from spectrum, and of course you can hear that the high frequencies have been taken out. So let's leave that at around 120. We can then look at the highs. So let's have that around 1K, and of course the mid band is now going to be everything that's left after the high and the low have been set. Okay, so the next thing to do is just hit Control G and Control drag the chain. We'll just name these. So we have a low, mid and high band. And then it's just as simple as making sure that we solo the appropriate band for each of those chains. So it's a fairly transparent effect. There's ever such a slight coloration, but it's certainly nothing to worry about when you set this up. And this is now going to let us apply different effects chains to this to each of these chains that we have here. So, for example, we may want to drag the utility onto the low band and just pull the width down to make sure that's in mono. Then possibly we would want to sidechain this so that we take the input from the kick drum. Just very roughly set this up for now. So we're now getting the side chaining happening on those low frequencies, so the kick's getting to pump through nicely. But of course it's not very obvious when we've got the mid and the high playing at the same time. So let's add a kind of stereo widening effect to the mids. And I'm just going to drag this as well using the Control key onto the highs. So we've now got that nice wide sound coming out of the mids and the highs. And then perhaps we can add some reverb. and what else should we go for? Let's just add an overdrive to the highs. So this is the sound that we start with. And you can see when you look at this that there's not for all of this kind of thickness that we've gained here, we don't really have a huge amount of increase in volume on the track either. So we've brought a whole load to the party here without really affecting our overall master out here. So it's a very good technique, and as I said, there's a huge number of different things you can do with it. So just to give you a further idea, there's a rack that I've set up here, and I'll just quickly talk through this. So the top four controls here, all very self-explanatory. You've just got a volume for the mid band and a volume for the high band, and that just allows you to alter the balance of the overall sound as however you like. Then there's the low mid crossover and high mid crossover. So if I just add some of this high drive, which is only affecting the high frequencies. And you can see here how this is working as well. So they're fairly standard controls that you would probably want to map for the rack, and then of course the four at the bottom are all creative effects to some extent. So if we just look at the low chain, as well as having the multiband dynamics in there, we've got the utility making it mono. There's some parallel compression happening there, which is increased via this low punch control, and there's also the side chain, which is easy enough just to put whatever input you like in there. It doesn't have to be the kick. Of course, you can be as creative as you want with that. Then the mid band has the stereo widening via the filter delay, and again, if you've got a dedicated plug-in for that, then all the better. There's also a reverb in there. And the high band has the stereo widening and overdrive to add that crunch that we've just heard, and also there's a reverb happening in there as well. Now, with regards to the reverb, it's mapped slightly differently for the mid and high, and there's a different reverb in for each of those as well. High drive just adds a crunch to the high band. The width, fairly self-explanatory. And then the low punch is actually quite subtle parallel compression. And depending on what source material you've got, that's going to have a different effect. Okay, so that's this rack in general. Now I've made both the frequency rack and also the sample auditioner rack here, which has also been used in this tutorial. They're both available for download for subscribers from the website. So if you're a subscriber, you will receive the link for this to download. If you're not a subscriber, just head over to www.quantizecourses.com. There's a small box on the right hand side, and if you just pop your email in there, you'll be sent the links. And just to clarify, there is no spam that comes through this. You'll purely be notified when there are new racks to download, videos to watch, or articles to read, and all of that stuff is free. So I hope that you've enjoyed the video, and that you find this technique useful and enjoy using the racks. As always, any comments very welcome.